Thanks for staying with us. It's been a long year and also a grueling year of lockdown levels since the outbreak of COVID-19 in South Africa. The various interventions by government to save lives and the economy of the country have been better than nothing for some, unlike if things were left to waste. For others, it has been a long and frustrating journey that often ended up in business closures and retrenchments. Since many has been affected by this pandemic, we take this moment to reflect on some issues the country had to put up with since March this year. Collen Lemawane spoke to Karabo Mashugane, who's an enterprise development specialist at 2020 Insights and Kabelo Ncholo, who is CEO of Yourself Management.
All right, thank you very much. As we look at the year that was, in as far as the 2020 year that was very devastating for many businesses around the country, and the problem that came with the cascading effect of the closing down of businesses and the job losses that would follow. So for us to have an analysis on the impact on small businesses, we have Karabo Mashugane, who is an SMME or enterprise development specialist with 2020 Insights, and Kabelo Ncholo is the CEO of Yourself Management. Gentlemen, welcome to our program and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Colin.
All right.
Thank you for the platform.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I'm going to start with Karabo and just go through some points of analysis in as far as the first interview we heard just after lockdown level 5, the preparation that one could have talked about for this pandemic could not have been fathomed at that stage. How do you analyze a business impact that was unexpected at the beginning of this year and how it affected an enterprise development official?
Well, I mean, it was obviously a shock, everybody having to stop and remain stationary and the movement having to stop, and the inability of all businesses really to operate. A lot of markets closing, those hit obviously small businesses quite hard. We had just come out of a recent increase in the VAT rate, and obviously we're struggling with unemployment still. So the situation, which was already quite dire, where we were still looking for government to come with the structural adjustments to the economy, I think was made even worse with this hit. And a lot of small businesses, despite the support that came as a consequence of that, a lot of them just didn't make it, And those that are still here are really still struggling a lot. We're seeing very large businesses shedding jobs, closing some of the programs they're running, their investments, reducing investments. And that has a knock-on effect in terms of the market demand and the demand for services for small businesses. And so even for a practitioner like us, we had to really focus on how do we help businesses, firstly in accessing the support that is there, but also looking at how do you assist them to change their business models, to relook at their target markets, to relook at their competitive strategies that they use to go for those target markets, and also the operating strategies that they employ. Obviously, big investments had to be made in technology for most businesses, being able to operate remotely, etc. And also then the financial implications of all of that in terms of the funds that were available for investments and the dwindling turnovers, etc., and profitability. So just really a relook at entire business models and entire business strategies for SMMEs, for how we do businesses, but also obviously for large businesses and the country in general.
Kabelo, I mean, like the business stoppage was very abrupt, but for one to wait to get back in action and look forward to recovery was really a long wait. So then how was a business that had to stop with their year plans, had to endure this long wait, and how does one get back into action even?
I'd like to just to acknowledge what Karabo said. None of us anticipated the stop the pause that we needed to do and what COVID brought into the business or small businesses. Because of small businesses, I mean, not so many businesses have reserves. Say it's more to do with not so many small businesses can have reserves to go over 3 months. So most small businesses, in fact, you are lucky to have a reserve to be able to retain or to be in operations for over 3 months without any operations or any income. And we, especially black-owned or black-run SMMEs, they were already affected. We do not have like a very healthy cash flow. And when this happened, it had a big hit on us where it's been almost over 6 months of no income at all. And bills kept on piling. The stress that came with it and now you are stressed and you have to let go of some of your operations or some of the department that were bringing income to your business. And it's been a very stressful time for entrepreneurs or for business owners, where we do not know, and at the same time, we need the business to survive, and meaning the business to survive is the owners of the business needs to be there for the business while any other things have been affected. So it's been tough, and not so many have been able to open doors. And when I'm saying so, it's because of most small business before COVID were already struggling. And when COVID came and the type of an assistance, not so many small businesses got help through assistance. In fact, I'll make myself as an example. The assistance that I got was through the UIF, where my staff were able to have some portion of payment through UIF. But you are being an operational, you got an operational expenses such as an office and so forth. All those bills kept on piling. And lucky for us, because of we own our assets. So most businesses have closed down because of you have stopped operating for 18 months. And after 6 months, you still have to go back and pay a rent for your office with 6 months, So that it's actually been one of the most impact that our entrepreneurs or small business owners have actually felt.
Was there any temptation to dispose of your assets in order to mitigate the impact of expenses that were fixed? Like you were talking about, having to pay rent and so forth. Did you really think of trying to have some cash by letting go of what you owned?
We are talking at the time whereby, yes, we can dispose the asset, but it was not the time because of not everyone was holding on to what they have. So no one was willing to actually go out and open up and buy any assets because of it was an environment economically. So we didn't know what to expect. So everyone was holding on to whatever they have. So even in disposing the assets, who were you going to dispose the assets to at that particular time? So there's been like a less in terms of transactions what could be done unless you were going to dispose liquid assets such as your vehicles and whatnot. Those were easy, but at the same time, they were not actually going with the market value. So you were still having to take a knock. And understanding that when you're running a business with an OPEX, your operational expenses and so forth, and having to go through a period that we have went through based on COVID, where 6 months where there's no income at all. On that 6 months, business is to run. Everything was not stopping. We stopped, I think, for a particular reason, but for a particular time, but everything needs to be back paid. And this is where the most stressful, or what we feel in the stress as entrepreneurs, where we still have to service debt, where we had no income at all. And again, was the fact that before the COVID itself, we were struggling. So we don't have reserves where we could had like 6 months running where you could tap into those particular reserves. So most businesses are basically month to month to go, where you have secured projects, and with COVID coming in, all projects were cancelled, and you cannot even blame your clients. You cannot blame it on anybody. It was a world pandemic.
Talking about project management, Kabelo, I'll get back to you on that one because you operate more on the outside business operation kind of section of the economy, but I want to get onto the shop floor now. And Karabo, when I make an example of a factory where you manufacturing goods, it's quite a challenge to refer to what Kabelo was talking about in as far as operational expenses when you have machines that you use to manufacture goods and you're looking at input, processing, and output, and getting your products on the shelf. And they have to also be consumed by the client, and the value chain they're having stopped. With hindsight, how do you analyze what could have been done better other than having liabilities and doing that long wait until an announcement by the president that there would be lockdown 3, 2, 1, and you won't even know when?
Yeah, so I think back when we started, I remember in February when we did an interview, I couldn't, when they shut down initially in Wuhan in China, one couldn't even imagine. I tried to imagine what it would be like if Johannesburg was shut down, if it was on lockdown, and it was, it's something that we've never lived through. It was unimaginable. So when eventually the entire country shut down, I don't think anybody can really be blamed for not being properly prepared for that. I think it was just a shock for all of us. And the primary concern for everybody was obviously our health. And I think compliance with the lockdown was very high in the beginning. And then obviously as the economic impact started becoming real for most people, then the patience with the lockdown started wearing thin. But we were mostly unprepared for that. And every business starts with the market. It's the market opportunity that the business is servicing. It's the market need and how the customers consume your services. So when the customers stop consuming services, when everybody's just locked down into their house and the only thing we consume really is food and online sort of online services, entertainment, etc., there isn't much that you can do. But a lot of businesses really then had to think, how long do we expect this thing to be sustained? Initially, we had a 21-day lockdown. I think it was pretty clear from the start that there was no way we were going to be able to reopen the economy after 21 days. But it was, I think, part of that processing, that shock that, okay, here's an emergency thing. Let's first see what happens. And then, government will then proceed with in making decisions as the situation develops. And there isn't. But now that I think we've lived through it, I think we're still in that process where now that we've eased some of the lockdown restrictions, people are becoming freer with their movements, with their interactions. And that is causing, again, obviously infection rates to rise. And so we saw the president coming in with some additional restrictions. And my fear is that because the vaccines have started being rolled out, a lot of them are going to take very long to come to most of the people in this country. So I think the challenge is probably going into winter again next year. The fear is having to go back to stricter measures of lockdowns, etc., where most businesses, the ones that have survived, are really hanging by are really holding on for dear life and cannot afford to go into another lockdown. But if we don't have the pandemic under control, unfortunately, the economy cannot function. There is only so much of a death rate that we can tolerate in this country, and government will have to stop that, because I think the primary responsibility is to protect the lives of South Africans. So the fear is that we're in the situation again, we're in the situation where initially there was a shock, it was unthinkable. We're getting a bit relaxed now, but I think it's more, what we have to focus on is how do we now, with the benefit of hindsight and understanding how bad things can really get, what do we have to do now when the economy is still open to minimize the impact should the economy start closing down again, probably around next year, March or so, after the festive season.
So I just want to know if we have any success stories and the success rate in as far as the assistance of government is concerned, because you're looking at SARS making an announcement that there's going to be more than 58% of businesses that don't think will make it and survive, and just smaller percentages of the pockets of businesses that think they would be sustained and they would thrive but not be profitable because of the lockdown levels that would not get all businesses to be galvanized back into action again. So do you think that the financial assistance that was granted to businesses really helped in any manner whatsoever? Just very briefly.
Yeah, so I think we had a challenge in government naturally and banks want to fund businesses that are operating responsibly and that have a chance of survival. So I think we had a challenge of separating compliance issues from survival issues, that a business also that is non-compliant, a business that is operating informally, still employs people, still provides a living for the business owner, and is better than that business owner and those employees that are employed, even if informally, having to go to SASSA to sustain themselves. And so the help that initially came out, I remember when the Department of Small Business Development going into their website and seeing the requirements in terms of how they wanted the businesses to be in order for them to comply for their assistance in terms of just their financials, etc., being in order. Same thing, I think, with the banks in terms of the funding that they even got from government. For loan guarantees, etc. The requirements were still that the vast majority of small businesses could not access that. And that is part of the reason why we had such a huge failure rate, that I think the differentiation between really this is a critical situation and it's better to save a business, even one that is not running the way we would love it to run, than to restrict the support to businesses that are really operating optimally. It was understandable, though, obviously, because if government is using tax money to fund businesses, you want to fund tax-compliant businesses. However, it had then the impact that the impact of COVID became much worse than what we expected. And I think, if anything, probably the focus would have been better off focusing more rather than on the businesses themselves, on providing money to individuals, to employees, etc., so that the demand in the economy stays alive, and then that demand can drive the SMMEs. But yeah, it was a challenging situation. I think, as I said before, that the primary focus was on the health situation.
Okay, let me do this on the challenging side of things. When we talk about challenges, companies that do events are really on the back foot, and this is where now Kabelo comes in. Festivals, promotions and activations, and like 75 capacity or 50% capacity of audiences or spectators or whoever has to attend that event. Kabelo, how is this manageable for a company that has been closed and has to open up for business but not be fully operational?
Collen, the impact is unthinkable. And for me, it's you push back to government, you take the small business and the model in terms of how the business is going to be assisted. Because if you would take that, every business that is operating in South Africa has a tax number. And there's SARS has some sort of a data to be able to access us. And they will know, say, for an example, if you have this business, this is the tax, like you have paid tax for over 15 years, and you probably just behind with 2 months because of what will then happen. And I'm just going to give you an overall view or helicopter view of how businesses were affected, or small businesses. Because of January, February is not a very good productive month for any most of the business, if I may say so, especially businesses that are into service, because of we only starting from picking up from March, right? So it's normal that you be back behind with, say, for an example, I'll make an example with myself. You'll be back with about 3, like January and February, in terms of your compliance or having to be paying for your tax. Now, there's funds available, you have staff that you are paying UIF. They have the number of staff that it's actually you are under your business. But still, because of now you are non-compliant based on those particular months, now you could not get an assistance at all. And what does this do or affect you? It affects the very same people that they have a number to say, this business A, your self-management, how many staff does your self-management have? And all they needed to do was to go through the UIF files. How long has your self-management been paying the staff that is under them? And how will your self-management be affected by this? What is your operational expenses of that, of such? So we go to the bank And the bank says, no, if we're looking into your records or the past, we could not get an assistance. So we found that. We got in a positions where a few of the businesses, we refused assistance even when we could even prove how much loss we have lost based on the projections of the income that was coming because of our client being into advertising and marketing and events, that they had to pull on their spends and all project needs to be put on pause. Now, we could not even quantify or explain to say, okay, here's the expenditure, this is what you're going to do, or this is what's the expected income for the business, and based on the COVID, now you cannot going to get this income. And that has affected.
You know, Kabelo, just to nip it there, sorry to interrupt you, one can imagine the frustration that businesses had to go to, and we believe that in the second round of this discussion, we will get and delve much deeper into some of these frustrations. But for now, we're going to have to leave it there. And I want to thank you so much and appreciate the time that both of you have made to speak to us. And, you know, we will have to continue looking at 2020. And what a year. It's not a year that one can celebrate looking at businesses that shut down and job losses. So, gentlemen, let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Collen. Thanks for having us. Cheers.
Thank you, Collen.